Hello and welcome to the CLI-ALPMA Innovation Legaltech Week 2021 Demand Programme and today's session on what it takes to change mindsets. The focus of today is about understanding and sharing practical insights that relate to lawyers' opportunities and challenges when it comes to thinking differently and applying different thinking, particularly when legal practitioners want to innovate. This session will complement the session that a colleague of mine are doing on the 8th of February, which will look more at the theoretical side of mindset and how it influences behaviours and actions, and then thinking about ways you can build what we refer to as a transformational mindset, which is linked heavily to a growth mindset, which some of you may have heard. My name is Annie Briggs. I'm the Head of Capability Development and Change at G&T, and I am privileged and honoured to have Anna Lozynski here today to interview her. Anna is a very experienced legal practitioner, general counsel, author, and incredibly well placed to talk about today's topic. So welcome, Anna. Thank you so much for your time today. How are you?
Thank you. It's a real honour to be here. So thanks, Anu.
Great. So Anna's going to take us through her journey and answer some questions shortly. I thought initially I would just share one of my insights in terms of thinking differently, given I started my career as a lawyer in private practice in London. And one thing I noted in terms of my biggest challenge was that one of the attributes I sort of treasured in terms of me and my openness was my curiosity. And I was even nicknamed Curious George. But that was seen at my review as something which needed to be tempered. And I was told that I needed to ask less questions, speak less, not think as much, but do. And I think that sort of contravenes the work that I've been doing. And I'm sure, Anna, you can comment on that too today, where this idea of being open and opportunistic and asking questions is actually really, really important. So when I think about that challenge of thinking differently, how did I turn that into an opportunity? Well, it took me on a completely different career path. So for the last 12 years, I've been engaged in coaching professional athletes and working in the legal industry with those in the high performance world and finding ways to build programs that actually empower lawyers to both understand and develop a different type of mindset. So that's my very brief sort of insight in terms of the opportunity and challenges to think differently. And I'd really like you to share your journey now and talk to us about your legal journey and your journey into the world of legal innovation.
Thanks, Anu. Great story. I can relate in a different way in that instead of being told I was too curious, the focus was very much on the technical and to almost forget the rest. So, don't worry about being creative. Don't worry about, to use a cliche word, thinking outside of the box. It was just literally following through the legal thinking. And that was the recipe for being a great lawyer, and that's been my conditioning. So, I can relate to your story. But just a little bit about me. So, hi, everyone. So straight after finishing law school, I started out at a major Australian law firm. So I dabbled in M&A before settling into commercial litigation. And I was a commercial litigator, but also an insolvency lawyer as the global financial crisis unfolded. Then as a second-year solicitor, I was selected to go on secondment to one of Australia's top 4 banks based in Sydney. And after my stint there, it was clear that in-house lawyering was far more my jam. And in 2008, I took a job at General Motors Holden, which took me to Shanghai for 2 stints working on the Chapter 11 of General Motors, as well as its relisting on the New York Stock Exchange. In 2012, I was appointed as a Greenfield General Counsel to establish the legal function for the Australian and New Zealand subsidiaries of the L'Oreal Group, the world's largest beauty company. As Anu has mentioned, I'm also an author, a blogger, a coach, a speaker, and a social media content creator. I sit on the advisory board of She Breaks the Law, a global innovation female-focused network, the Australian chapter of CLOC, the Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, and a fashion tech startup, Ms. Tyler. So that's a little bit about me.
That is a little bit about you. And I completely relate to this idea that, we often refer to this as the I-shaped technical lawyer. And as you know, Anna, the core capabilities of lawyers have grown and expanded. And when we look at some of the recent models, they talk about the importance of mindset, of resilience, of courage, all the attributes we would consider important in terms of appreciating and developing mindset. What can you tell us about Legally Innovative?
So in 2017, I felt a higher calling to put my fingers to a keyboard and start writing a positive and practical call to action to the legal profession to do law with a progressive and future-focused mindset. In 2018, I launched an online community at Legally Innovative on Instagram, which now has almost 2,000 members, as well as my first ebook called Legally Innovative, which is now also available as an audiobook. The ebook is split into 3 parts. The first part is to be bold, and it talks about unlocking your innovation potential. The second is to be curious, about becoming an innovation maven. And the third is to be disruptive. So how do you claim your innovation power? At the end of each part, there are exercises, what I call WOW goals, ways of working goals, to help you transform your mindset, your professional relationships, and your legal presence. Legally Innovative is one of 6 or 7 products that are all designed to inspire the inner innovator in you, and they've been downloaded all over the world. I'm working on a whole lot more content in 2021, so there are ways that you can stay in touch via my website and, of course, on Instagram.
That sounds great. So you mentioned that progressive and future-focused mindset. I just want to ask a question about that, and that's that there are some exercises in the book that people can do to sort of embrace that. Can you give us an example of something that would help that sort of progressive and future-focused mindset?
So one of the things I talk about, and I think one of the big blockers for lawyers around change and transformation and innovation is resistance or fear. And one of the exercises that's in Legally Innovative is around becoming an expert witness of your own fears. So what are your pain points around innovation? What are you afraid of? And then almost diagnosing where's the root cause of that. So where's the conditioning coming from? So I know in your case, your imprinting was that your feedback was actually to stop being curious. So that might be where, the root cause of your fear, which you've clearly worked through very successfully. And so it's almost going through a process of, and write them down. I really encourage you to do this self-work, write it down, and then almost create an action plan as to how you're going to change, because it's got to come from the self first.
Totally agree, Anna. And this is going to talk to some of the stuff we talk about in terms of different brain structures and how we can think. We tend to work in an automated way, and if we don't consciously stop and think and do things to enable change, then they're not going to happen on their own. And as you said, that idea of tracking, consciously thinking, writing down, etc., is an enabler for change. So thank you so much for sharing. That sounds like a great activity and one that people should do. Can you describe a challenge that you have personally faced in terms of being able to think differently and what you did to overcome it?
So I think when I first started working with legal tech providers, I noticed that there was a very different capability and mindset between product developers, IT professionals, and lawyers. And I wanted to bridge that gap because I knew that that was the recipe for this ultimate success. And I didn't want it to be so foreign and challenging. And we know that the world of programming is, in fact, a set of other languages, literally. And so I signed up to a Coding 101 masterclass at General Assembly one night, so I could have that greater empathy and understanding of, who was around the table in terms of collaborating in order to achieve the end goal. And so building on that, this year I'm actually completing a beginner's Python course because I'm fascinated by data and I want to understand it a little bit more than knowing that Python is a programming language. and this isn't because I think lawyers have to code in order to be successful lawyers of today or the future, but it's more knowing that these languages are shaping the future of technology. And I think as new age lawyers, it's incumbent on us, and it's a professional duty to stay across what's going on, keeping our knowledge relevant. And in my mind, this curiosity and this learning of perhaps not traditional skill sets for lawyers only leads to better problem solving. The other thing is I find tech just fun and magical. So, my philosophy is rather than being afraid of it and feeling like it's an unknown or scary, then, I just jump in and download it and try it or do a course. So it's really about being mindful of, okay, what are the next business game changers and how's it going to actually work in the outside world, and learning about them so that then you move from discomfort to feeling comfortable with all of these new concepts or ideas or programming languages or ways of working.
That's so spot on. And I talk about the idea of brain coding, that we have coded, over years, our experiences, things other people say, things that we do. And when we get to adulthood, we almost stop and just apply things in an automated way. And so if we want to change our mindset, if we want to expand those coding options, we've actually got to try new things. And so that idea of having a mindset of continuous learning and an appreciation that you need to shift that comfort zone is so important to change your mindset. And I had someone I was coaching say to me once, I'd love that growth mindset. How do I get it? Like it was a product that you bought off the shelf. And, I said, how long did it take you to become a proficient practitioner? And therefore, that's how long it's going to take to build this expansive mindset or different types of mindset really that draws consciously on different brain coding so that you can make different choices, or you've got I guess a larger menu to choose from, and doing the things like pushing your comfort zone, opening yourself up to learning about new technologies or new ways of being, and appreciating that lawyer skill sets are going to continue to expand, and so you've got to continue to expose yourself and develop new skills. So that's a really great example. Thank you. So what advice, being in this position where you are pushing your comfort zone, you're obviously doing all this different stuff as well as practicing law, what advice would you now give a younger version of yourself, so a junior, up-and-coming lawyer, what advice would you give them?
So I'll begin with trusting yourself. I know that I was an absolute worrywart about what was I going to do next? Am I doing the right things in order to set myself up for my ultimate goals? And I can say now that worrying is an absolute waste of precious energy. So just trust in yourself. And I think so long as you're being proactive and you're networking and you're learning about, what's going on in the world, you're asking questions, you're being inquisitive, you're putting yourself out there, you're saying yes to new work experiences, the sexy and the not sexy, by the way. You're progressing rather than perfecting. And I think also just getting to know yourself. So, leadership, leadership ends up being, one of the levers that you need to pull is to have a really high level of self-knowing. And I think it's actually really important to start that early on. So, what are your passions? What inspires you? What is your conditioning? What have been those moments where, you've had some incredible lessons or teachings? I can think of a whole lot from law school. So you don't need to be incredibly experienced, we've all been conditioned, and as I know, our imprinting stops at 35. So you're still in the process of conditioning if you're under 35. And it's really important to know how do you show up in the world, and what does that look like, and how do you make other people feel? So I think having that really strong understanding of one's sense of self and that self-knowing makes for, just really important practice for being a leader. And let's not forget that you don't need to have the title to be a leader. And I really want to say that. You know, I came up with some of my best ideas and implemented change when I was in my 20s. And I didn't have the title to go with it, but I had the courage to speak up and suggest something. And so I think we can be leaders in every role that we have. You don't have to have the title to underpin that.
Absolutely. All of that is so great to share. And I think that the idea of personal effectiveness, self-awareness, these are becoming capabilities in terms of what lawyers need to develop. So starting early on, getting to know yourself, and that sort of self-talk, talking to yourself, understanding yourself, will also help change your mindsets, because it challenges what you're saying to yourself, or what you might be saying to other people, or what you might be saying about yourself to other people. So it's that conscious interjection that's really important. So I think that awareness generally is so critical. So if you think about lawyers practicing today, what do you think their biggest challenge is in terms of being able to think differently?
So one of the best analogies I've heard here is that digital transformation is a bit like government guidelines, nutrition guidelines. So you've got to eat the 5 serves of vegetables a day, but, you know, everyone knows this, but the key is you've got to do it, right? And you've got to do it consistently. So you can't have one healthy meal a week and then let it go if your end goal is to achieve a healthy lifestyle, right? So, you know, to answer your question specifically, and I'm going to go back to this notion of resistance and fear, because, you know, an innovator's mindset isn't one that's yet taught in law school, and it's still not prevalent in the profession. And there's really interesting Harvard Business Review article on open innovation, and it said that the biggest barrier to successful innovation is simply a reticence to commit to it. Mm-hmm. And lawyers are often too busy, they're too skeptical, this is out of their comfort zone. And so our minds are acutely trained to go to the worst case scenario, think of all the risks, rather than lead with, okay, well, hang on, what could go right here? What are the benefits? You know, this could redefine success, and it could create opportunity. And so my advice is always to have this kind of killer, can-do, open mindset, which I think you mentioned at the start. And so it's actually catching yourself consciously when the self-doubt and the fear creeps in, when the self-talk, you know, almost literally talks you out of taking action. And so if you commit that you're going to be a change agent and you're going to make that as part of your operating way, or that's one of your operating principles, then you inspire others to do that, and all of that leads to this incredible kind of upwards innovation spiral, and it becomes normalized rather than, oh gosh, you know, well that's different, that's too different. So if everyone has innovation, and we know that innovation isn't just about tech, it can be creativity, it can be just doing things in a different way. You know, it doesn't have to be that massive reinventing the wheel. Then again, it becomes part of the norm of the way that you'd solve problems and deliver legal services, but then also, you know, your colleagues as well. So I think at the moment we think of it almost as something that's too far away. You know, it feels like space. It's there, but it's too far away. Whereas what I'm inviting everyone to think about, or how to reframe it, is, do you know what? It's just like consulting case law. So if you want to know what the precedent is and you need to determine an answer as to how to solve a problem, well, it may be that tech is part of your answer. So, you know, in terms of solving problems, so it's literally just part of the checklist in a lawyer's mind, which is, you know, our legal training of, hang on, okay, I've got this problem. How do I solve it? Okay, let's go to option 1, might be technology. And if it helps you, make technology option 1 in terms of your checklist so that you never miss it.
Love that, Anna. That's so good. And it's really interesting you say that, because I talk about doing this individual work, which is about this self-talk, conscious awareness, etc., strategies to build what I refer to as a transformational mindset. But I also say, if you're in an environment, whether that's your network, if you're an individual practitioner, or your team, if it's at work, it's the responsibility of the leader. And I say leader can be anyone, whoever's leading the project, whoever's leading the interaction, that they've got to create psychological safety, because we know that when we don't feel safe to come up with ideas, to come up with new ideas. And that's not uncommon in an environment where the role of a lawyer has been to identify risk and what can go wrong and be sceptical and analytical. But if we create a nurturing environment where people are encouraged to think differently, and that is the norm and part of your cultural norms, then it enables people to create the mindset that will allow them to enable innovation. So I think some of the things we've talked about, there's, common theme in there, which is be aware of resistance, try and go, don't encourage an environment where people don't feel safe to speak up, because you might have a mindset that's willing to think differently, be curious and creative. But a bit like my experience, where I wanted to be that way, but the environment didn't allow me to be that way. And then it creates the coding or the conditioning, which works against innovation and an innovation mindset. So I loved that example. Thank you so much. So before we move on, I just want to talk a bit about, to finish things off, around building this growth mindset, or transformational mindset, innovation mindset. Before we do that, is there any last advice you'd like to give your fellow lawyers around changing your mindset, bringing an innovation mindset?
I think the couple of points I want to touch on, it's a daily attitude and a practice. So, no one's going to, there's no pill that you can swallow. As you said, Anu, you can't buy it off the shelf. It's really something you've got to cultivate within, and it's a choice. So just like the food that you put in your mouth, it's a choice. No one's going to force you to eat something. No one's going to force you to become innovative. Question is, and what I encourage people to do is, this is going to define your success in the future. And so for me, the way I see it, it's actually, there is no other choice. So the earlier you start, obviously the easier it's going to be, because depending on your conditioning and depending on your own willingness to change, and if you don't have the support around you, obviously that becomes even more difficult. If you do, bonus. But you really need to just make those choices every time that you come up against it. The other thing I want to mention is this notion of looking outside to grow within. And I love, so Gabrielle Chanel, she used to read for inspiration until she became an inspiration herself. And I think, again, that's just a habit that one should do every day, is listen, what I call mind food. So 30 minutes a day, whether it's a podcast, an article, reading what thought leaders are saying on LinkedIn, but really looking outside to then gain inspiration for what's happening in our legal backyard. Because unfortunately, the legal profession is not the leader in tech. It's not the leader of change. So what do? We go outside in order to say, do you know what? How can I make that happen in my legal world? And that's where the really great ideas come from, because you don't have to be this incredible idea generator. That's, that feels like a very lofty task, and you may feel it's above your pay grade. But what you can do is get inspiration from, what's happening in the business world, and then, finding a way or thinking about, and hopefully putting to action, how can you actually implement this into your day-to-day. And the third point I want to talk about is this notion of idea generation. So I know you just mentioned, you're almost shut down, right, when it came to being curious. Now, you may get shut down along the way. So in business, it may be that, your stakeholders aren't ready, or they can't see the light. Or it may be that the people that you're working with will say no initially. Don't take that first or second or third no as a no forever. So if you've got ideas, keep sharing them, because the more you share, it will prove that that's the way, it'll help you cultivate that innovative thinking. And, one day someone's going to say yes. And you may have had to say it 20 times in different ways and using different examples, but I can guarantee you'll find someone who's listening who will say, do you know what? Yes, because they're finally ready for it, or they've heard it, finally it's landed for them. So I think don't give up. That's a really important part of innovation. And again, failure is part of innovation. So, if someone's not going to say yes to you first time, that's technically a fail, but that's cool. It just means,
absolutely.
It just means you've got to sell it in differently, or perhaps you need to think about it a little bit more in terms of how you're communicating it, or how you're, how you're describing it.
I think that's really important. And I think in the context of failure, often it's really hard for lawyers to grapple with the idea of failing. And when I'm coaching or working with lawyers, I talk about it's not about the end result failing. So it's not about the advice you're necessarily giving to your client being a failure, but the process you go through doesn't need to be linear. It can be messy. It can be, you don't have to know all the answers. It is best to involve other people, to ask, to collaborate, etc. So you can fail along the way. You can try some tech that doesn't work and try something else. So the failure concept can be foreign to lawyers because the idea is they've always been incredibly successful academically, and then obviously what they're doing for clients is providing what often people refer to as perfect advice. And Anna, I have another small thing to share where I was working with people around mindfulness and opportunities about, how can you be mindful in addition to meditating? What can you do? And a lawyer said to me, what if I'm no good at it? So I just wanted to add to your point that it's not about being good at it, and you don't get good at something unless you practice. You don't learn how to play the piano or write your own music unless you actually put hand to piano and have a go. So agree with you that people need to keep trying, and if someone says no, not now, that doesn't mean not ever. Keep going, keep bringing your ideas up, play a part in creating that culture of innovation. I think everyone has a responsibility to do that if we're going to shift the thinking in the profession and create great ideas. So I thought that was fantastic. So last question, just want to turn a bit more to growth mindset. So for those who are watching this, many of you may have heard of Carol Dweck, who talks about this idea of fixed mindset and growth mindset. When we think about lawyer traits, so we think about the traits that make lawyers successful. So being skeptical, being analytical, being pessimistic, they're all aligned to what Carol Dweck would talk about being a fixed mindset. And when we talk about an innovative mindset or a growth mindset, it's almost the opposite. So knowing that, what are your sort of top 2 to 3 tips in terms of building, I guess, a mindset that can serve a lawyer, but also serve the innovation and change that's happening in terms of legal practice?
So I think self-awareness is key. So, when you do a news workshop on the 8th of Feb and she walks you through what are the characteristics of fixed and growth and some of the studies behind that, I think be really honest with yourself and say, where do I land? And then that should be your platform to work out what's next. But I think one of the key things there, and it's sort of touching on a theme that we've already talked about, is the notion of experimenting. So again, our whole brain is designed, and most of our thoughts are negative in nature. And we're only in our conscious mind 5% of the time. So what we're relying on 95% of the time is the conditioning and the imprinting and what's in our subconscious. And so rather than defer to, okay, that's the voice in my head is saying, oh no, that's impossible, it's too hard, that's not me, oh gosh, no, I could never, or I will never. Again, it's this notion of almost knowing that that's you're going to be your go-to, and saying, all right, well, hang on, let's unpack this a little bit, find out what's underneath, and then actually experiment. So whether that means getting some coaching, or talking to a mentor, or getting some advice from your boss, if that's the kind of relationship that you have, or even your friends, and then almost say, do you know what, this is say it's being scared to try new things, and then literally go and try a whole bunch of new things. And whether you do that on your own or you do that with mates, totally up to you. But it's this concept of if you don't actually try it and walk in the shoes of, then you won't know, and you're just relying on the inner critic. And the inner critic doesn't always support a growth mindset. So we know that from the research in neuroscience. So it is this stepping into the consciousness. So choosing to not just defer to your unconscious, but stepping into the conscious, knowing where your baseline is, and being pretty honest with yourself about where your baseline is. And I think also, if you've got that relationship with your boss and colleagues, be really open about it and say, do you know what, this year, these are the things I want to work on. So can you give me work opportunities which will almost force me into cultivating that new behaviour or practicing that new behaviour? Because then everyone around you kind of goes, okay, well, that was a bit, something doesn't quite come across, naturally. Then everyone's got that patience and support for you that, oh, okay, well, we all know that that's on Anu's personal development goals for 2021. So again, if it's until it becomes second nature, let's have some patience with her, or let's support her on that journey.
Absolutely.
Being really open about it, because it's okay if you know that you've got a fixed mindset. That's totally fine. It means you've got an incredible opportunity to transform. And then if you've got a growth mindset, then congratulations, that's absolutely fantastic. And then, the question is, how do you sustain that, right? Because maintaining is sometimes just as hard as transforming.
Absolutely. So I took some notes there because I just thought what you were saying was really good. And I love the idea that, commit to trying new things and don't give up on them. And part of that, and what you mentioned, Anna, is make yourself accountable. So we know from a coaching perspective and a commitment perspective that the more you share what you're doing, the more likely you're going to be able to achieve success with that. And so this idea of sharing keeps you accountable, but like he says, also encourages others to be patient with you trying something new. And being open and opportunistic are great attributes to have if we want to change our mindset. And it's a really interesting point you make, because I've been working on my mindset for 13 years now. And, I think the transition from fixed to growth, and I had a pretty fixed mindset when it came to practicing. And when I went to my coaching session, I said to the coach, why don't I just answer the question, because I know I've got a better answer than them. So you can imagine how fixed my mindset was, not open to the potential of someone else, just thinking that I was going to be able to give the best answer, and very impatient to draw out the information from another person. And so that transition from fixed to growth took a lot less work than growth to transformational and maintenance there, because you're constantly needing to build and grow your habits and make further change and continue to stretch yourself. So I absolutely agree that it's not about where you're at. It's about appreciating where you're at, accepting it, and then doing the work to move forward. And if you are there, maintaining it. So it's not like an end goal. It's Simon Sinek talks about the infinite mindset, and that idea that it's a continuous playing field. And I think that's a really important point. So, look, is there anything else you'd like to share, Anna? Because if there is, we'd love to hear it. If there isn't, we'd love to hear how we can get more information from you, best way to contact you, and then we can close off for today.
I think I've probably talked everyone's ears off enough, so I'll say that's a wrap. But if you'd like to get in touch with me, I'm on Instagram, so the handle is @LegallyInnovative. I'm on LinkedIn under Anna Lozynski, and I've also got a website, annalozynski.com. And if you want to subscribe to my fortnightly EDMs or newsletters, then you are most welcome to. And you can purchase the products from my website as well.
That is fantastic. Thank you, Anna. And I'm also on LinkedIn under Anu in brackets Brady, which is my maiden name, Briggs. And you can send me a message there if you've got any questions. I'd love to interact with you, or I'm on abriggs@gtlaw.com.au. So we hope you enjoyed this session, and if you'd like to receive updates about the work of CLI and ALPMA, please be sure to follow them on LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter. Thank you so much, Anna. I really appreciate the time today, and it's been fantastic talking to you.
Thank you, Anu. That was super fun.